Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into the fascinating mechanics of incentive alignment. We'll be unpacking how invisible reward structures literally dictate human behavior. And we're going to trace this all the way from a life-or-death historical crisis right down to those tricky little everyday choices you make. Let's get into it.
So, picture this. The British government is facing an absolute nightmare trying to transport convicts all the way across the world to Australia. Obviously, a massive logistical headache, right? But the really glaring issue was the shockingly high mortality rate. I mean, people, both the personnel and the passengers, were just dying in massive numbers aboard these ships. The system wasn't just failing, it was a textbook example of a perverse incentive. They were essentially funding a system that had zero financial penalties for death.
Think about it. The original setup essentially paid ship captains just for getting people on the boat, not for actually keeping them alive. It was completely flawed. But then the government made a brilliant little pivot. They completely changed the reward system to pay only when the voyage was successfully completed. So suddenly, captains only got their money for the convicts who actually arrived breathing. By shifting all that financial risk directly onto the captains, the death toll plummeted almost overnight. It's wild.
Section 2. The Power of Incentives. Distilling the core principle.
Okay, so what exactly happened there? Well, this is a classic case of incentive alignment. Basically, it's how you design a reward system so the outcome you actually want is tied directly to the paycheck. When you're managing really high-risk operations, aligning those rewards is honestly the ultimate cheat code. It solves the classic principal-agent problem, making sure the person doing the work actually wants the exact same result as the person footing the bill. And this whole historical mess teaches us three huge lessons. First, if you design incentives right, you can completely change human behavior. Second, aligning rewards is pretty much the most effective way to handle risky operations. And third, well, it forces us to face a pretty dark economic reality. In this situation, human life was basically treated as an expendable commodity. At the end of the day, it wasn't some sudden wave of morality that saved those lives. It was just a highly targeted paycheck. Now, this isn't just dusty history. Thinking about incentive structures is absolutely vital today, especially when we're trying to minimize human cost. Think about the big shifts happening right now, like healthcare moving from a fee-for-service model to value-based care, or private companies taking over deep sea and space exploration. In any of these extreme, high-risk fields, we constantly have to step back and ask, are the financial rewards of the operators genuinely aligned with safety?
Moving on to our next section, the barber's vested interests, a modern pivot.
So let's bring this down to a much more everyday level. You've probably heard that old piece of advice, never ask a barber if you need a haircut, because he will answer that you most probably need one. It's kind of funny, sure, but man, does it perfectly nail the reality of biased advice.
And that brings us right into the whole messy collision of vested interests and asymmetric information. See, organizations and people are just naturally going to push solutions that pad their own wallets, and that doesn't always line up with what's best for you as the consumer. Now, to be fair, they aren't necessarily being evil or malicious about it. It's just that their incentives are completely tied to selling their service, regardless of whether you actually need it or not.
All right, let's look at the final section, Navigating a Biased World, the Viewer's Action Plan. So, how do we handle this in our own lives? Well, when someone hits you with a really strong recommendation, your absolute first reflex needs to be questioning their motive. Who exactly is cashing in if you say yes? Once you figure that out, you've got to separate your research from the person selling to you. Go out and dig up data from independent sources, people who literally have no skin in the game. Only after doing that can you really weigh your options objectively, completely free from the pressure of the transaction. At the end of the day, if you want to empower yourself to make genuinely informed choices, there is one absolute non-negotiable requirement. You need a very healthy dose of skepticism. You really have to be willing to constantly push back and challenge conventional wisdom. Because, let's be real, the people handing you that wisdom, they almost always have their own incentives quietly running in the background. So, I want to leave you with a thought to chew on. Take a step back today and look at the biggest decisions you're currently wrestling with. Who really holds the vested interest there? Are their incentives actually genuinely aligned with your success, or are they just looking out for their own?